This lecture accompanies Chapter 12 of your textbook on Humanistic Models of Personality. Humanistic psychology regards the study of the mind as not just another science. All of the other psychological models treat personality as an objective thing that exists and can be studied as if it is separate from being a human being with an awareness and consciousness and unconsciousness. Humanistic psychologists passionately believe that the study of personality is not just another science because the human mind is self-aware and therefore fundamentally different from studying a particular chemical, for example. The humanistic model focuses on addressing this idea of awareness in a different way. Instead of just pushing it aside and ignoring it, the humanistic approach involves the study of psychological processes that are uniquely human, including free will, willpower, reflective thinking, imagination, introspection, aspirations, creativity, and happiness. Phenomenology refers to, quote, one's conscious experience of the world, end quote. Everything a person hears, feels, and thinks. And this conscious experience of the world is thought to be more important than the world itself. In other words, reality might exist, but it has to be perceived to matter. The important implication of this is that only one's present experience matters. Other people, other places, past and future, all of that is an illusion. And because only our present experience matters, we're able to choose what to think, feel, and do. In other words, we have free will. The idea that we construct reality is very old. There's a quote in the Talmud, "We do not see things as they are, we see them as we are." Similarly, Carl Rogers is quoted as saying, "I do not react to some absolute reality, but to my perception of this reality. It is this perception which for me is reality." Your particular experience of the world is called your construal, and this construal, which might be different from anybody else's, forms the basis for how you live your life, including goals you set and your perceptions of obstacles and opportunities. For example, a common situation such as a job interview could be viewed in different ways. One person could view it as an opportunity to show off talents, while another one could view it as a terrifying trial of character. How an individual sees a particular situation, such as this one, depends on his or her personal construal system. Humanists believe that humans achieve free will by deciding how to interpret their experience of the world, and that leaving the choice of how to interpret your experience to others is how you lose autonomy. In other words, you're not participating in the development of your personality if you just let society interpret your experience rather than you doing it for yourself. The humanist perspective believes that psychology has a special duty to study how we perceive, understand, and experience reality. To do this, one of the earliest psychological scientists engaged in what was called introspection, and he had his research assistants do this as well. And this is where they observed their own perception and their own thought processes and then tried to understand the world by analyzing their perceptions. Humanistic psychology is rooted in existential philosophy. Existentialism was a broad philosophical movement that began in the mid-1800s as a reaction against rationalism, science, and the Industrial Revolution. Rationalism, according to existentialists, had gone too far in attempts to account for everything. All had lost touch with human experience and threatened to make us all into robots. The purpose of existential philosophy was to regain contact with the experiences of being alive and aware and unique. Key questions of this movement, which informed humanistic psychology, include: what is the nature of existence? How does it feel? And what does it mean? Because humanistic psychology is rooted in existentialism, it's worth knowing about some important concepts from existentialism that influence the rise of humanistic personality models. One concept is thrownness, and this means the time, place, and circumstances into which you happen to be born. Being thrown into pre-industrial farming society is very different from being thrown into a technological modern society, and it has implications for how personality is experienced and how it's expressed. There's also the concept of angst, which refers to a kind of existential anxiety, the unpleasant feeling caused by contemplating the meaning of life and how one should spend one's time. There are three sensations that Jean-Paul Sartre associated with angst, and that includes anguish, which is said to be something everyone feels because choices are never perfect, and all choices lead to both good and bad outcomes. The second one is forlornness. Because each person must make his or her own choices, we all experience a sense of feeling lonely, sad, and forsaken. And then finally, despair. This is experienced because of the awareness that many of the outcomes are beyond our control. Existentialists believe that humans have a moral imperative to face thrownness and angst directly and seek purpose for existence. This authentic existence means being honest, insightful, and morally correct. Living an authentic existence requires what existentialists refer to as optimistic toughness. This is the courage to face mortality and the apparent meaninglessness of life. People who don't worry about the meaning of life, don't try to think for themselves, don't examine their life, or they do what society, convention, peers, or so on tell them to do, these people are said to be living in bad faith. They're ignoring the existential questions and ignoring their moral imperative. The essence of the human experience, according to existentialists, is understanding that you must die. And this understanding actually is said to allow us to be aware of our freedom and gives us dignity. So the existential challenge is to do all you can to better the human condition, even in the face of life's uncertainties. This idea is to ask, what does life want from me, instead of asking, what do I want from life? Research has found that people who reported doing this, asking, what does life want from me, rather than what do I want from life, felt more hope and less depression, and were more likely to have found a significant meaning for leading their lives. Existentialism is Western and focused on the individual self. The Eastern alternative is the opposite of existentialism, and it's worth spending a few minutes talking about because it too has been incorporated into humanistic perspectives. The Eastern alternative argues that the self is an illusion. There is no unchanging soul at the center of each person, and it's said that this illusion is harmful because it leads to feelings of isolation and too much concern with me or mine. The true nature of reality, according to an Eastern perspective, is that everything and everyone are connected now and across time. There's nothing special about an individual's experience of the present moment. In fact, there's a belief in a kind of immortality. People are part of something larger that will last forever. Anika is that idea, the idea that nothing lasts forever. Nothing lasts forever and everything is always in flux. It is best to accept this fact instead of fighting it. According to the Eastern alternative, all moments, past, present, and future, have equal status. Enlightenment is said to be achieved by understanding that nothing will last forever and that the well-being of others matters as much as your own. And this enlightenment, in turn, leads to universal compassion. The result of enlightenment is said to be nirvana. It's a serene, selfless state, and it is the Buddhist alternative to existential angst. Maslow and Rogers are probably the most well-known humanist psychologists, and they mixed European existential philosophy and an Eastern view of the self, along with an American attitude of yes, we can, to develop a kind of optimistic humanism. These theorists started with the premise that we all have free will, and they added an additional premise that people are basically good. So optimistic humanist perspectives operate from the idea that we all seek to relate closely with one another and have an innate need to improve ourselves and the world. According to optimistic humanism, specifically Carl Rogers, people have one basic tendency and goal, and that is to actualize, maintain, and enhance their own experience. Rogers thought that a person can only be understood from the perspective of his or her phenomenal field. The phenomenal field refers to the panorama of one's particular conscious experience. Here we deviate from existentialism, which says that life has no inherent or intrinsic goal. According to Rogers, we do have the goal of actualization. And again, that's just the basic need to maintain and enhance life. Maslow developed the hierarchy of needs as a way to illustrate how human motivation is characterized at different levels, all of which are filled in the service of reaching self-actualization. In this model, the lower needs must be met before the higher order needs can be met. Maslow's ultimate need, which is the same as Rogers, is self-actualization. But unlike Rogers, Maslow believed we had to meet these basic needs of physiological needs and security and comfort, social activity, and self-esteem before we could reach self-actualization. This model can be applied to life in general, or it can be applied more specifically. So if we think in terms of career choice, what needs does the career have to meet? One could argue that if you don't feel secure in your job, you aren't going to be able to get your belonging and social activity needs met within that job because you're too busy worrying about holding on to your job. In terms of employee motivation, one could argue that employees must feel secure before they'll show initiative and imagination. Secure employees might want to express themselves through their work by contributing to the organization's goals. However, if an employee is not secure, then their motivation is going to be surrounding getting that security. This model can also be applied to understanding happiness in different cultures. A meta-analysis found that financial and economic status is more important in poorer countries than in richer countries, whereas home life is more important in richer countries. A fully functioning person is someone who perceives the world accurately and without neurotic distortion. This is someone who takes responsibility for his or her choices and is happy. Rogers emphasized the importance of unconditional positive regard as being necessary to be fully functioning. According to Rogers, conditions of worth get in the way of people becoming fully functional. Conditions of worth exist when you don't have value for yourself just for being yourself. It's when you value yourself only because you're good enough at something. So you're a good enough child or a good enough parent, or you're a good enough worker or a good enough student. Experiencing unconditional positive regard from people in our lives prevents us from developing these problematic conditions of worth. Maslow disagreed with Rogers on this point. He thought that anyone could become fully functioning, even if they conditioned their worth on being a great student or being a great worker. The last model we're going to discuss in the humanistic paradigm is the self-determination theory, developed by Deci and Ryan. This focuses on the question of how you can be the best you by developing intrinsic motivation. So intrinsic is acting a certain way because of your own desires and choices. We can differentiate this from extrinsic motivation, which is acting in a certain way because of external pressures. Ryan and Deci propose that there are three central intrinsic goals, and that attaining these goals are necessary for being fully functioning. The three goals, or the three ways in which we can get our needs met, is autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So autonomy refers to finding your own way in life and making your own decisions. Competence means finding something you're good at and becoming better at it. And relatedness refers to establishing meaningful and satisfying ties to other people. So if we have these needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and they're met, in that we're able to find our own way in life and make our own decisions, we're able to find something we're good at, and we're able to establish meaningful and satisfying ties with other people, then it's been found that we're more likely to have vitality, positive emotionality, we're more likely to contribute to the well-being of others. Having these three needs met is also negatively related to depression, negative emotions, anxiety, and physical illness.